Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well and your families are healthy during this time. We enter into the third week of Easter, and we certainly do see signs of spring that are kind of sprouting everywhere. If we go outside, of course, it's a little bit sunnier, although it's been a cold week. We do have the sun present there with us. Also, certainly flowers that are coming out in front of the rectory, but then also the trees and so forth. So we have these signs, these beautiful signs to us of spring, that we're coming into this time of spring, but then also entering into being into the middle of Easter, we can celebrate the resurrection and Jesus' new life that he's given us. This week, of course, as we know, we had Father Archangel's passing, but it was certainly a sign of a man who lived with faith. And I think in some ways, Father has become a symbol for many people of faith in the midst of this pandemic. And maybe that's the reason why so many people are responding on Facebook and so forth to these pictures, and everyone seems to know about Father's passing. Of course, that he had to bear the cross of the pandemic, but then also that he did so with faith. And he is, as a priest, he is certainly a man of faith and an image for each one of us of faith. So today we have the road to Emmaus. So we'll read that for you today and reflect a little bit on that. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. That very day, the first day of the week, 2 of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped, looking downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place in these days?" And he replied to them, "What sort of things?" They said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word, before God and his people. How our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all of this, it is now the 3rd day since this took place. Some of the women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find the body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those with us went to the tomb and found things just as the women had described him, but him they did not see. And he said to them, 'Oh, how foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?' Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on further, but they urged him, 'Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over.' So he went in to stay with them, and it happened that, while he was with them at table, he took bread and said a blessing, broke it and gave it to them. With that their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, 'Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us?' So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those who were with them, who were saying, 'The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon.' Then the 2 recounted what had taken place on the way, and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread." So one of the greatest honors that we have as priests is to be able to be with someone at their death, when they're dying. And we get to oftentimes just be with people at their most difficult moments. Their most joyful moments, of course, in baptism and marriage and all these wonderful sacraments, but also their most difficult moments when they're dying, when they're at their lowest point, when their faith is struggling. For me, one of the greatest honors for me was to be there with Father Arcangelo this past week, to be with him. And it occurred to me that during those times, those hours that I was able to spend with him, and just represent each one of you and represent his family as well, it occurred to me that God had prepared me for this moment. That by those hours that I was able to spend in prayer, as a priest and religious, that God had prepared me then to be with him, to be with the image of God that is in each one of us, but especially as in Father, in a special way because of his priesthood, but then also because he himself is the image of God, like each one of us. Certainly also his guardian angels were there present, Padre Pio probably, St. Anthony, St. Joseph, all these wonderful saints that he loved so much. And he himself was there, the image of God. We hear in the second reading today, and that's not one of the readings that I read today, but you can certainly look at that with the Sunday readings as you watch Mass tomorrow. In the second reading it says, "Conduct yourselves with reverence during this time of sojourning." That word sojourning means on a pilgrimage, that each one of us are on a pilgrimage right now. We're on a pilgrimage. This is not our destination. This is why we're not going to get too overly preoccupied or upset during this life when we go through the ups and downs. And having reverence. Now, reverence is a word that we don't use too much today in our English language and in our popular culture. But we know what it is when we see it. It is that care, that attention, that respect that we have for things of God, for things that are holy of God or deserving respect and reverence. Tied with this also is what we call piety. Again, this word piety, if we hear it, we think to ourselves of that pious person, maybe our grandparents or somebody like that, who is very prayerful. But piety itself has to do with the way that we act in the presence of something that is holy, in the presence of God. Each person is the image of God. And nature itself, as we see this beautiful day, a sunny day, is God's gift to us, but also God's creation. And so in many ways, it is something that is holy, that we're supposed to respect. As we celebrated Earth Day this past week, we realize that this is something that we're supposed to take care of and respect. Each moment that God gives us, each of these moments are precious. We could not take our next breath if it wasn't for God, if he wasn't present with us. On the road to Emmaus, we see that the disciples are walking on this road, and all of a sudden, somebody comes up to them, next to them. They don't know that it's the risen Lord. They're not able to see him, which is something that we see oftentimes in the Gospels where the risen Lord appears. They don't always see him. There's something different about the risen body. But the disciples are traveling, and the risen Lord, of course, comes up next to them, and he asks them, what are you discussing as you walk along? They stopped and they looked downcast. Why? Because these disciples were despairing. In their hearts, they had lost hope. They had lost faith. But they were struggling. There was a struggle that was going on. They know that Jesus was crucified. They were there either present or they heard about it. They heard about the horror of it, that Jesus himself was basically destroyed as a human being, that he lost all of his blood, that he hung upon a cross as a criminal. There was darkness in that. And they couldn't overcome that at that particular moment, even though there were signs of light and hope everywhere. There was hope in the sacred scriptures. the prophecies from the Old Testament, which Jesus is trying to teach them here as they're walking along, those prophecies all prophesied that the Messiah would be one who would suffer, that he himself would go through suffering and trial and difficulty. The words that Jesus spoke on the way up to Jerusalem to die. We hear each one of the Gospels, Jesus is telling the disciples, I will suffer. I will bear the cross. You too will have to bear the cross in your life as well. The witness, as the disciples admit, of Mary Magdalene and the other women. Mary Magdalene is the first to go to the tomb with the other women, and we know as a church that she's the first to bring the gospel, to evangelize, to bring the gospel back to the disciples, that Jesus indeed has risen. And yet, in the midst of all these good things and joyful and hopeful things, they can't believe. They're struggling. There's some sin there, and there's some doubt, and there's some temptation. All of that is kind of going on inside of these disciples as they're downcast along the way. They are filled with doubt, and they lack hope. Maybe we're experiencing that right now in our lives. Things have been hard. A lot of people are struggling with depression, normal depression, maybe not clinical depression, but depression because the fact that everything in our life is turned upside down. These are normal things to go through. Jesus, though, is present. Just as he was with the disciples on the road to Emmaus, so he is with us, walking with us on this road, on this journey. But we don't recognize him. The risen Lord is with us. The Easter season offers us an opportunity to become more aware of the risen Lord, the one who is in heaven and gives us eternal life, and what says to us that we too will rise again and that we will have risen bodies. His presence is with us in so many ways. Maybe his presence is so much with us that we don't recognize it, that we have to be reminded. We have to be reminded to show reverence, to respect and understand the holy things that are around us, to pay attention to each person in our family, even as they kind of drive us crazy sometimes. They are the image of God. But then also in nature, go for a nice walk and recognize God's presence in nature. We do this, we then grow in faith and hope, those virtues, which seem to us to be high up here and we don't seem to be able to reach them, but God helps us to grow as we recognize and reverence his presence. This is a good time to slow down. It wasn't something we chose, but we are slowed down. And we now can pay attention and respect his presence all around us. Have a great week. We'll talk to you later.